Hello, welcome back to the garage. Today, I'm going to be going over the Electric Eyrie. Pay no attention to this, we'll get to it soon. So I have my board set up. I will eventually make it to the lake, winter, and mountain maps, but I figure for these teaching videos, and maybe for these initial playthroughs, it makes more sense to have them all on the same locale so we can learn from it all the same way. So let's go through right from the top. With the Electric Eyrie, gonna do some pretty basic setups. Here, you're gonna gather all your birds. So I'm gonna do that now. Then you're gonna put all but your leftmost roost onto the roost track. That last one is going to be going on the board. You're also going to put your victory point marker out there, obviously. We're actually going to first, before I put anything on the map, going to go in order, because you would not be doing Electric Eyrie first unless there is not a marquee. So let's do that real quick. I'll be right back. Okay, so back to setting up the Eyrie. A roost and 6 warriors are placed in the clearing opposite the marquee. And every time I put every time I put root out on the table, and the marquee is part of it, it's just this brilliant aha moment of why this game is so amazing, because you just have this incredible asymmetry right from the start, and here we have it. Next up, for setting up the Eyrie, well, first of all, you're not going to use the leader cards if you're playing with the Clockworks. You will use the Royal Viziers, and they just get tucked over here because they are bird cards. They get tucked in the bird column. So we'll get to explaining that in a second. So the rules up at the top. So Electric Eyrie still has Lords of the Forest. So if they are tied in any location, they rule that location. Super easy. They still have it. It's still annoying. If you're not the Eyrie, that is. Hate surprises. Can't play ambushes against them. So both of them have that. Both of them also have poor manual dexterity. They don't have a hand of cards. They just draw a card off the top of the deck. That's what they operate their turn off of, and then it goes away. If a ability was to give them a card, they would get a victory point. If you as the player were to get a card from them, you would instead pull one from the top of the deck. The only thing is, they no longer have the disdain for trade, but all of the Clockworks are only getting 1 victory point per item anyways. Previously, or as a player, you would be able to use Woody Woodpecker to get the full value for the items. But because they're Clockwork, even though it's not printed on here, they still technically have that disdain for trade rule. No matter what they're making, 1 victory point each. All right, Birdsong. So, reveal and craft. This would get you nothing. Something like this would. So let's use that instead. So in this case, you would take your pancakes, you move it over here, get 1 victory point, even though it should be worth 3 if you're a person, and then you would put this under here. Major difference in terms of human and Clockwork characters is that the Clockwork does not have the columns recruit, move, battle, and build. They instead have the different suits, and each of those columns covers each of those actions. So we'll get to that shortly. Put it there, and that's it. That's all your Birdsong is. So Daylight. This underwent a relatively recent change that's kind of big. And right now, Leder Games is offering sticker errata for the decree changes. You can also print off a print-friendly errata that I will put a link in the show notes for. So this goes right over the entire first part of daylight. That changes things, like I said, pretty drastically. It's really important that you put these changes in if you have an old version of the Clockwork expansion. Future printings will have this errata as part of it, but you know if you have it, because if yours just says resolve the decree from left column to right as follows, that is the old printing. The new printing says resolve this decree, recruit for all 4 columns from left to right, then move for all 4, then battle for all 4. If you're keeping track at home, you're already thinking, whoa, that's different. Yes, it is. So that's the biggest difference, is that you are no longer doing recruit, move, battle for fox, recruit, move, battle for mouse, recruit, move, battle for rabbit, and then the wild card. You are doing recruit, fox, mouse, rabbit, bird. You are moving fox, mouse, so on and so forth. This is a really beneficial change, and I'm just going to change things up here, and I'll show you why. Obviously, we wouldn't have the pancakes, but whatever. So the other change is going to be, there are some slight adjustments, and I'll kind of cover those as I'm going through them rather than now, because I haven't even explained what they were or what they are now. So I'll just highlight those. Last thing before I continue is it specifies now you only take these actions for columns that have cards. Stands to reason. Daylight, first thing is somewhat complicated because it's all these things mushed into one. Resolve the decree. Again, recruit for each column, move, and then battle. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to recruit warriors equal to cards in a column in a matching clearing with a roost. So for instance, we do not have a roost in any fox clearings, so you just move onwards. Don't have anything here. We do have 2 in birds. I mean, we only have 1 clearing here, so there's not really a tie. But if you did have a tie, it's in the clearing with the most enemy pieces, then the one with the fewest Eyrie warriors, and then the lowest priority. There are a number of things in the Electric Eyrie that prioritize low priority, so high numbers. It's kind of because the Electric Eyrie, they have to be a little bit tricksy, not as much as, say, the Alliance, but they are the deposed old power, so they need to kind of sneak in rather than drive forward like the Marquis. Next up, move. You're going to move from a matching clearing you rule with the most Eyrie warriors. So that with the most Eyrie warriors is a new change, because it used to be from the clearing you rule with the highest priority. To demonstrate why that might be beneficial, if you're moving from rabbit clearings, the previous rules would say this is the one you should be moving from, rather than the one that has the most pieces. So this is just a way to kind of insulate the Electric Eyrie from doing weird plays, overextending itself. So again, we do not have anyone in fox clearings, and we don't have anything there. We have 2 cards here. So you're going to move to the adjacent clearing with no roost. That used to be in the tiebreaker section, but that caveat of with no roost has been added to the main action, and it's super important. I'll explain in a second, but if all of them have roosts, currently none of them do, but the tiebreaker still stands. You're going to move to the one with the fewest enemy pieces. They each have just 1. And then you're going to leave warriors exactly to rule the origin clearing, or equal to the number of cards in the column, whichever is higher. So destination ties, fewest enemy pieces, and lowest priority. Again, sneaky. So of 9, 8, and 12, 12 is obviously the lowest, and we're leaving 2 because we're operating on the bird column and we have 2 cards there. So the with no roost clause used to be down here as a destination tie. So you would be moving to an adjacent clearing with the fewest enemy pieces. And if there was a tie, and only if, the first tiebreaker is a clearing with no roost. So for instance, fast forward to next turn, if this is our exact setup, lo and behold, this clearing has the least number of enemy pieces. So it would be really easy for the Electric Eyrie to get into this feedback loop of sending troops out and then sending them back to where they came from. Which, while the whole thing of turmoil is different than how human players operate, it is still important that the Eyrie kind of carve its way through the forest, and that old way was not working. So now it is the first priority of a clearing with no roost, and only then do you go down to the tiebreakers. Finally, in the decree, battle. You're going to battle in a matching clearing. Defender is the player with the most buildings, which includes 0. Just because you don't have buildings doesn't mean you're not going to get beat up on. And if the column that you're operating under has the most cards, you do 1 extra hit. So this is the first time when I get to demonstrate really why this 1 action at a time as opposed to 1 column at a time, I think is a lot better. There, I guess, could be some people who liked the simplicity of going recruit, move, battle, recruit, move, battle, recruit, move. But to me, I think it makes more sense to do all recruiting at once, all moving and all battling, and it gives you more interesting plays like this. Because before, recruiting and moving, we didn't have anything to do with the fox clearing. But now that we've moved someone into a fox clearing, we can do something for battle. So right here, you would be battling. The number of cards, the only time it really plays into anything is the column with the most of them is where you're going to be doing 1 extra hit. But we do have someone in a fox clearing now. Gonna not throw it over the table. 3 and 2, so 1 and 1. That would be our fox battle. Then our bird or our wild card battle wouldn't happen because we don't have any other standing battles. So you would just move past it. But that's another really important kind of thing to point out. Unlike the human-controlled Eyrie, if you ever can't do one of these things, like, when we had to skip recruit and move for foxes, that does not, set off your turmoil. Not being able to do another battle does not set off my turmoil. And up next, second part of daylight, is when you would build your roost. Only then, you're just going to do it once, build a roost in a clearing you rule with highest priority with no roost. If you can't place a roost, you fall into turmoil. Obviously we can, but if we fall into turmoil, if we couldn't, we humiliate, so we lose a victory point for every one of the bird cards in our decree, just like with humans. You purge, you discard all your cards except your viziers, and you rest, you go right to evening. You do not depose, you do not behead the leader because you don't have a leader. And the resting going to evening is not nearly as much of a slap on the wrist. Well, actually, for human players, it's kind of like chopping off your hand, because if, for instance, you were playing with the charismatic leader, so you're placing 2 warriors every time you recruit, and you run out of your burbs to put on the map, if you went into turmoil here, you would skip everything else. That is brutal, as someone who that's happened to a number of times. In this case, the only time you will ever go into turmoil is after you've done recruiting, moving, and battling. So if that happens to them, honestly, they didn't really need to put this here. I'd imagine they just put it there to kind of have one more way that the clockwork and human players are the same. Finally, in evening, also just like the human players, you're going to score victory points based on your rightmost empty roost space. And one other difference, I should just keep this out to point out, there is not the point plateau like there is in the human Eyrie. It goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5. It's just 0 up to 6 over here. And I would imagine this might be because at the second 4 is when you get to draw your extra card, but because the bird talons can't hold a hand of cards, they don't have a hand. So instead, this goes up to 6. So even more backbreaking than the human-controlled Eyrie, if the Electric Eyrie is allowed to really take hold of the forest, they're going to be scoring 5 or 6 victory points a turn, which is kind of brutal. So look out for that. Yeah, aside from that, let's do a little reading. I didn't do this last time. I'll start it with all the future factions. The Mechanical Marquee 2.0. This is the simplest of the bots, can be used to fill out the player counts in dozens of configurations. Though this bot is straightforward, don't get complacent. At least one player will need to keep it in check, especially if you're the only other player doing it. Let's move on to Electric Eyrie. The Electric Eyrie will inspire fear in the most stalwart of players. Like the Eyrie dynasties, this bot can ramp up its action potential aggressively. Absolutely true. Especially, actually, I would say exclusively with this errata now in place. Like I said, it got kind of stuck in a feedback loop and pretty much turned itself into a not fully participating member of the maps before I printed this off. So yeah, last but not least, I guess, are difficulty and trait cards, same as the marquee. So if you're just playing off the board like I will for the playthrough, that is normal. Easy, you're only adding 1 Vizier card instead of 2, so just kind of making them a little bit weaker right off the bat. Challenging, so you're going to take the bird ambush from the deck, which you probably aren't going to be using anyways, and add it to the bird column. So you have 3 actions in that column rather than 2 at the beginning. And just like all the other factions, Nightmare is the same as challenging, except at the end of evening, you score another victory point. So cheating on top of cheating. There are 4 traits, which you can use 0 up to 4, just like last time with the marquee, as I continuously forgot about it. Make sure someone is actually paying attention. Let's see, War Tax. So this would be the one I'll use for the playthrough. Whenever you remove an enemy building or token, its owner loses 1 victory point. Oof. You all heard it on the channel ahead of time. I did declare that I was going to be playing the Vagabond, so I'm not cheating choosing a faction that has literally no buildings to remove. So that is the end of that. Thanks for stopping by. See you next time in the garage.